So while everybody gets settled in, I'll begin. So hello everybody and welcome to High Street Regeneration Courting a Fairer Future in Bristol. I'm Beverly Gormley and I'm the Heritage Network's Programme Manager. And if you don't know us already, we're the UK's umbrella body for non-profit organisations that are rescuing, restoring, reusing and running older buildings. And until recently, we were known as the Heritage Trust Network, and we're currently rebranding to reflect our broadening membership. Over the last 5 years, our High Street Regeneration programme has focused on communities that are reusing historic buildings to benefit their towns and city centres. And today, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Mark Coates from Creative Youth Network and Clare Phillips and Nuria Garcia from Purcell, who are doing amazing things in Bristol city centre and beyond. Before I hand over to Mark, I just need to point out that this session is being recorded and everyone who booked a ticket will be sent the link. So don't worry if your connection goes down or the postman knocks at the door, but please do introduce yourselves in the chat and feel free to enable closed captions if you need them. It should be in the little toolbox at the bottom. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat box during the session and we'll have the opportunity to ask questions at the end. So that's quite enough from me, and I'll hand over to Mark, Clare and Nuria.
Fantastic. Thank you, Beverly, and thank you, everybody. Good to meet you. It's a pleasure to be here. Clare, do you mind putting up the slides?
Everyone see that?
Yeah, crystal clear.
We can. Fantastic. Great. So by way of introduction, my name is Mark and I have the honour and privilege of leading a charity here in Bristol called Creative Youth Network. Fantastic organisation. I'm not just saying that, I thought it before I joined it. It's why I took the chance to join the organisation. Let me start just by telling you a little bit about the charity, who we are and what we do. Clare, do you want to move us on? So yeah, Creative Youth Network is a charity with a mission to support young people to achieve their potential, whatever their background and circumstances. We're based in Bristol and we support around 2,500 young people each year. We have services for all young people in our region, but we particularly focus our offer on the most vulnerable, the most disadvantaged, the most underrepresented young people. So we have 9 local area youth clubs, but we also have a range of targeted services for young people. For example, young refugees and asylum seekers, young carers, young people who are slipping out of the education system or perhaps struggling with mental health and well-being. Oh, I think somebody needs to go on mute. Cool. Next slide, please, Clare. And really, our name sort of doesn't say it all by any means, but it says a lot about us as a charity. So as an organisation, we believe in the power of creativity, the unique way that creative practices can allow self-expression and help all of us, but including young people, to unlock our potential. We believe in the power of youth work, so important for young people and society. Young people are our future. They need services, they need support, they need opportunities. And as an organisation, we believe that young people belong at the centre of everything that we do. So that's a really fundamental value for us. And then that third word in our name, network, that's really important to us too. We believe in the power of partnership, working collaboratively with others and helping young people play an active role in their communities. So that's us in a nutshell. Next slide, please, Clare. So you may be wondering from that description what on earth I'm doing here, going to talk to you about a heritage restoration project. Why would a youth charity be getting involved in that? There's a lot of different reasons and I won't bore you with all of them, but as a little bit of context, Creative Youth Network was actually founded 50 years ago, originally as the Kingswood Foundation, and we were set up on a fascinating set of buildings in Kingswood in East Bristol. That site has its own fairly remarkable heritage history, which we won't talk about today, but it actually started with John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, who set up a Methodist school on the site. If you could click on a couple, please, Claire. There was then a successor school set up by another pretty inspirational and formidable Victorian lady, Mary Carpenter. And that then over the years morphed into a state-run reformatory school, effectively a borstal. So it was a very austere set of buildings used to sort of reintegrate, frankly, problem children into the community. And our history as a charity, we were actually set up in 1973 when that reformatory school closed. Public policy changed. We no longer decided to deal with young people in such a manner. And the history of Creative Youth Network was developing this site that was originally some quite austere Victorian school buildings. And what we steadily built up over the years was a really vibrant community of, we've got more than 30 social purpose organisations based with us on site up at Kingswood, who do an amazing array of things. We've got alternative learning colleges, circus skills, community transport, some fantastic organisations. So there's a bit in our DNA as an organisation managing other heritage buildings and sites. If you could move on, Claire. And then 15 years ago, we got an amazing opportunity to move what we did into Bristol city centre. So the courts, which will be the focus of our session this afternoon, it wasn't actually our first heritage restoration project. That was the old fire station in central Bristol, which you can see in the photograph here. And again, this is very much another story. We don't have time to tell you about this one today. But essentially, the charity got an opportunity to take the disused and semi-derelict old fire station and turn it into a flagship city centre youth hub, which I'm delighted to say we opened in 2012, and since then has been a thriving destination for young people and creativity. And hopefully you get a bit of a visual flavour on screen there of what we do. We run it as a youth hub. We have lots of courses, programmes, public events, and it really is a safe space and a world of opportunity for Bristol's young people and our community. So all that by way of introduction. Where on earth is the courts in all of this? Well, as I said, creativity is a big part of what we do as a youth charity. So we have lots of programs that support young people who are interested in art, creative practices, and lots of them are incredibly talented. But there's a problem. Next slide, please, Claire. And there's a very sort of long established known problem that sadly in this country, actually frankly probably worldwide, our creative sector is not fair. There's this well-known quote: talent is everywhere, opportunity is not. The UK's creative sector isn't fair. If you look at its workforce, it's disproportionately white, male, middle class, privately educated. And we'd really seen this in our work at Creative Youth Network. We've had over the years run so many services for talented young people who absolutely could break into careers in the creative industries, but keep hitting glass ceilings of one form or another. If you could click on twice, please, Claire. So the creative sector has typically over the years worked sort of through traditional ways through school and family networks. A traditional route has often been to take an unpaid internship or to take a low paid traineeship. And then what you find is actually it's only people from better off backgrounds who have the wherewithal to take that up. And that translates into some very stark demographics for our creative sector. So a couple of examples on screen here. 38% of those in the highest paid roles in TV, film and music attended private schools, way above the proportion that applies to our general population. So this is where we came up with a vision for the courts. Next slide, please. So our vision for the courts, long before we took on the building and had a plan to refurbish it, was we wanted to create a creative enterprise hub. We wanted a space that could bring together talented young people with creative and cultural sector organisations who were aligned with our mission to diversify the creative, their organisations' workforces and secure the brightest emerging talent. And I guess to achieve that, we needed to make this new building or refurbished building two things. One, it needed absolutely to be a vibrant place where if you're an ambitious creative sector business, you could base your business, modern workspaces that meet modern business needs. But we also absolutely needed it to be a space by young people for young people, and that was absolutely critical for us because the vision for the courts is a place that brings the two together. Next slide, please, Claire. So a whistle-stop timeline, and we'll talk in more detail throughout the session, but the courts was built in 1879. It was at the time new and a modern replacement for some reportedly pretty horrible justices' rooms at the council house. And given when it was built, late Victorian, Edwardian, really impressive architecture. I will skip over the entire history of the courts in use. That's probably a whole other talk in itself, but it had a long distinguished history and some fascinating heritage stories of what happened in the building and the famous cases that were heard there. But for better or worse, the courts closed in 1974. They were no longer fit for modern needs. New courtrooms were built locally, and from that date, really, so nearly 50 years ago, or before we started the project, they just steadily started falling into disrepair. The building was acquired in due course by a private property developer, Urban Splash, and the assumption was it would be converted for commercial use. That never happened. Effectively, there was what they call a heritage deficit. So in the jargon for it is always going to cost you far more than it's commercially worth to refurbish this listed building because you have to honour the listed status and all the heritage features. So it wasn't commercially viable. And that really was where our opportunity as a charity came in. So in 2014, we were really lucky to be able to fundraise to acquire the building. I think we paid a fairly nominal amount for it, but I'd say given the liabilities we took on, radically overpriced at that point. And the building had a variety of meanwhile uses while we worked out how is this project going to be feasible and how on earth do we raise the funds to make it happen. Next slide, please, Claire. So then in terms of the project and how we've refurbished the building, really the timeline has been we were lucky to secure support from the Heritage Lottery Fund in 2017, and they supported a 3-year development phase grant where we could assess the feasibility. And that's the point at which I joined the organisation and got involved myself. That was really successful, some fantastic work done. We were delighted in March 2020 to secure full backing from the National Lottery Heritage Fund to fund the actual refurbishment. You may have noticed that date, March 2020. 2 weeks later, the world, or certainly the UK went into its first lockdown. Everything changed. So we had a good old panic. Again, that's a whole other talk. What happened to the organisation and the things locally in 2020, but we found a way through. We got the project back on track. And then Russia invaded Ukraine and we lost a key funder commitment. So again, the project nearly fell through before it had even started. But we found a way and we finally got on site doing the refurbishment in September 2022, at which point I will hand over to Clare and Nuria, our wonderful architects from Purcell.
So I'll start by saying a little bit about who we are and what we do, and then we'll go back into the story behind this lovely building. So we're a group of 300 technical members of staff. That's a mix of architects, some of them conservation architects, heritage consultants, master planners, building surveyors, etc. And we have 14 offices. We have a few in Australia and Hong Kong, and then the rest all over the UK, including the Bristol studio, which is what Claire and I are sitting right now. And we do work on some new build projects, such as some of the new colleges in Oxford. However, heritage is truly on the heart of what we do, which is we're in fact the #1 practice for heritage in the world, according to the Architecture 100, which is a title we're really, really proud of. And these work in heritage buildings might mean adapting old buildings for new uses, extending and modernizing them, to make them more relevant, make them more accessible, making them more sustainable, and in some cases safe, which is something we'll see as we look through photos of this building today. All of this we do with great care to preserve and celebrate and protect the story of each one of these buildings, but at the same time make sensible interventions to make sure that the story of that building doesn't stop now and actually continues forward. And that is very much represented in our work in the old Crown Courts. So I'll just give you just a little bit more information, but I think Mark has done a fantastic introduction already. So it is a Grade 2 listed building, which was built by the city surveyor Josiah Thomas in the 1870s, and then it was extended again in 1903. It's situated in the heart of Bristol, as you can see from that top picture. So the building that has that red outline is the Magistrates Courts, and then it has the fire station to one side and the old police station to the other. So it's known as Bridewell Island, and it was a very key civic triangle at some point in time in Bristol. And there are actually records showing that there was a prison as early as the 13th century on this site. However, that's not the building that you see on the screen, obviously. And there was a few iterations, at least 2 iterations of a bridewell around this area until the 18th century. And then the last of which was deemed to be too small and not fit for purpose. And that's when the council decided to build this lovely building we have here. And again, it didn't look like this when it was built. So actually the area that you see in blue is what was built first in the 1879. And then the area that you see highlighted in yellow would be the 1903 additions later on. Then around 90 years after it opened, the Magistrates Courts moved to Nelson Street. So this building became the city's Crown Court, so now included 12 jurors in each one of the courtrooms. And then, as Mark said, shortly after it closed its doors because a new Crown Court was built just around the corner from it, and it laid empty and derelict and deteriorating for many years, as Mark said. And this is a really important detail in this project, as stopping this deterioration and undertaking any repairs that this lack of maintenance cost was a key part of this project and was a large part of the budget and the time that we spent on it. And as you can see represented for some of the images on this page, so other than 2 images, the second and the second to last, all of the other ones are from the courtroom spaces, but hopefully they start give you a flavor of the condition that the building was in when we found it.
It was leaking before. We just say that is not a real tree, just in case.
Correct. It leaked, but not that much. So here we go into the ground floor. So I'll just give you a kind of overview of what this this looked like when it was in use as a course. So what you see with in a red line is the previous outline of the building when it was first built. So again, what you see in blue would have been what we had back in the late 1870s. So they had a main entrance from Bridewell Street. I don't know if you can see my cursor over here, into which you would enter this main foyer, and you have the option of going into the 2 courtrooms that came with the building at the time. And then we had some ancillary spaces and the original staircase that went up to first and second floor. Then in 1903, what they've added a new entrance from Silver Street, which took you into a foyer that was in many ways much more grand than the first one they built. Then 2 additional courtrooms, with each one of them had its juror's office and a private toilet, and then more ancillary spaces and offices, and then an additional 3rd floor, which you'll see as we go along. So just a quick note. So the entrances before sorry, yeah, that's right. So access is a key part of this, and my colleague Claire will talk more about it as we go into the proposal. But initially what we had was a series of entrances, all of which were stepped. So we had this main entrance from Bridewell Street that was stepped into this foyer. These entrance into the second foyer were also stepped, and these 2 entrances through the alleyway were also non-level access. One last entrance that we'll mention that you'll see now in the basement plan is an entrance into the basement below. So the basement below contains the cells, which when they first were an overflow space for the cells in the police station, which was first north of the site, and then it was rebuilt in the south of the site. They are divided into 2 main spaces. So north in the blue area, which would have been the original one, it ended up being the male cells, and then the south of the building would have been the female cells, each one of them with some staff offices and kitchenettes associated. The other spaces that we see here are mainly services areas for the spaces upstairs. And then highlighted here in red would have been the individual staircases that the person who was being trialed in the court would have actually used to go up to the individual courtroom. So they never entered through the grand foyer that we saw before. They actually made their way from Silver Street down through this little staircase alleyway, and then they will be able to get into the courtrooms through these individual staircases, as we see here. The basement also is important to highlight that it has quite a charred history. So being that it was a magistrates court for most of the time that it was open, it served to trial people that committed petty crimes, so such as a woman that was imprisoned for being a storyteller. But then also the most important one is that it trialed children or minors. So there's some pretty sad stories of an 11-year-old who was arrested for stealing an old newspaper from his father, and his father was the accuser. A 10-year-old from early wandering the streets, and many of the young people that came into and were imprisoned in these cells and trialed in the courts actually ended up in reformatories. And in a weird twist of events, one of the reformatories they were sent to was that Kingswood Estate, which Mark talked about before, and ended up being CYN's Centre of Operations. This project is interesting for many reasons. A building which would have been such a negative space for the young people that stepped in it, into a building where they're much more celebrated instead and welcomed and applauded, which is one of the most beautiful parts of art, I'd say. And all these stories, mind you, there's many more, as Mark said, they can be explored through a digital interpretation app, and I'm sure Mark might talk to us a little bit more about it, that you can use as you visit the courts, and it's quite special, really. And now into the upper floors. So whilst most of the spaces on the ground floor, like all the courtrooms, are single story and the main 2 foyers, this west wing next to Bridewell Street actually has a first and a second floor that have this footprint that you see here, and then a 3rd floor which have a smaller footprint that we'll see on the next page. This initially, when it was first built, as you can see from the blue, it contained this room, which was the juror's room, or the magistrate's room, sorry. And then, let's go back, there we go. An associated office, and then later on, some waiting rooms and more offices were added. One thing that I'll talk about before I go on to the next slide is the roof, because you can start seeing it here. And this roof contained a mixture of many roof types. It had between flat roofs, hipped slate roofs, a flat concrete roof that was added in the 20th century, a series of roof lights, which were required for natural light in this building because it has such a peculiar floor plan. And what you get when you are in the presence of so many roof types is a great opportunity for something to go wrong, essentially, and for failure, or for weak points. And especially in a building which was left unmaintained for decades, as this one was, it created a great opportunity for some monumental water ingress issues, which then accelerated the deterioration of the building even more internally. So this is worth mentioning because the repair of this roof was a monumental part of this project, and making sure that there was no leaks in this building and ensuring there was waterproof was a big part of what we did, really. These photos probably give you a little flavor again of the condition that these upper floors were in. And lastly, I'll just quickly whiz through this, the second floor plan and the third floor plan. The second floor was initially the caretaker's flat. And then when the 1903 extension came along and they built that small area on the third floor that you see, then that became the caretaker's flat. And then the second floor was used as offices and ancillary spaces. And with that in mind, I'll pass on to Claire for the proposal.
Thank you. Unless anyone's got any questions now before we go on. So as sort of Mark said before, the CYN developed the fire station, and there's a lot of activities happening now already with young people and officers and music studios and performance spaces. So the court site was very much designed to complement that and work with this fire station and all the activities going on. It's designed to have lots of creative workspaces for tenants who are sort of buy into the ethos of CYN, and if you kind of are a tenant there, you will help support their young people. That might be through mentoring, apprenticeships, jobs, a whole range of activities to try and sort of, as Mark said, bring out the best in the young people they're working for. And it's sort of a melting pot of kind of creative people and young people. And so there's various sort of gathering points as well, where you can have a cup of coffee, or exhibition spaces or flexible spaces which can be used for dance, performance, lectures, pop-up cinema, whatever it needs to be. They're sort of flexible spaces around this wonderful street, as we call it, in the middle of the building, where the courtrooms come off of it. So this is when we do early briefing, we kind of do bubble diagrams to try and work out all the different things that need to happen, how they connect to each other and how they overlap, or they might be deliberately separated in terms of sometimes you want people to mix, and other times there's whether it's for safeguarding or whether it's sort of secure line, working those out. And also we've got this fabulous courtyard in the middle between the YMCA, a school, art space, life space, and the former police station, as well as the fire station, and this courtyard, and various activities and events can happen there. So there's a real melting pot of people and activities, and how to unlock that. So that was kind of in a diagram what we were trying to achieve. So this is our proposed ground floor plan. You can see in yellow we've got the 4 courtrooms. So courtroom 1 became this multi-purpose space. So it's set up so it can be for performances. It's semi-sprung floor, so if you want to do dancing, you can. There aren't many spaces in Bristol where you've got high ceilings where you can throw people in the air and they not hit the ceiling. So this is now one of these places where you can rent that. It's been used for exhibitions and a range of activities, essentially, and that's that flexibility is key for making sure that it's constantly used, constantly earning money to help the charity, and also get as many people as possible through the door. Courtroom 3 and 4 are workspaces, and so we've taken out in actually all those 3 courtrooms, 1, 3 and 4, the judges' benches to create more flexibility in the floor space, and their tenancy, which is fabulous. And then courtroom 2 is sort of the heritage courtroom, essentially. So this was part of our early assessments and review set out as the sort of the most significant because of the level of plasterwork detailing, the joinery and general condition of the space, and stained glass window. So we've kept the judge's bench in there and repaired the joinery. We did take out the 1970s dock and juror's bench, but they were, as you said, 1970s, they weren't the original. So this is also used as a workspace, but it can also be used for TV and film and other activities. So that's, again, a flexible space, but it's clearly identifiable as a courtroom more than some of the other spaces now that we've made some changes. We've got the sort of very long, as we call it, sort of street through. So if you can see my cursor, starting on Bridewell Street, you can come up the large grand staircase, the classical entrance into the foyer, which is mosaic floor. There's photos to follow. And then into another foyer here, which sort of marble columns and a terrazzo floor, and then down back into the Silver Street. Unfortunately, as Mark's sort of inferred, there were some budgetary issues. So when inflation kind of hit us with force, the entrance extension to the back has been VE'd, and there's going to be phase 2. But essentially, we will have a level access through here with a new staircase, and which goes to the up 1.5 meters to the ground floor, down 1.5 meters to the basement. Series of meeting spaces, office spaces to support all these sort of office and creative spaces. Little kitchen for a kind of cafe hub meeting point in here, which is great. Sort of restored the main staircases, which go all the way up on the west wing, which is obviously the 2 or 3 story building. Toilets and a range of toilets, accessible toilets, cleaners, stalls, tea points, all the other things that you need to have a functioning hub. And then a new entrance off Bridewell Street alleyway here, so that we've got on both sides, we've got level access. So we've changed the levels and the lift here so that we can have level access from Bridewell Street as well as Silver Street, which is obviously very important. And then the ground floor, as it was previously, sort of supporting spaces, office spaces, it continues to be so. So we've got a series of offices, tea points, kitchens, social kind of gathering spaces. And we modified the lift so that previously the lift sort of came out into the stair core, but we've modified it now. So we've got a new opening on this side. So if you're a wheelchair user, you don't sort of end up precariously at the top of the stairs, and there's a good turning circle and space to come through. So each time we're trying to make it safer and more accessible at every level. So this is the state of the building. Now, some of it is, as Nuria said, there was lots of leaky roofs and flat roofs, but actually the pitched roofs weren't leaking that badly. It was just the gutters were full of pigeon poo and grass and turf, and the water had come down and then gone over the back of the gutter and down the wall, and the damage was extraordinary, and the cost to repair it. So when we do management plans, we go on and on and on about gutters, but the damage that block gutters did to this building, the cost to fix it was horrific. But you can see the damage from other flat roofs over where we've got the lanterns and moulded plasterwork and sort of the loss of all the covings. You can see the lanterns here. I mean, that I thought that was a lead roof the first 3 times I went in, but that actually is glass. And you can see here we've replaced it with new glass, which is double glazed. The stained glass has been restored, and mechanisms so that they can open, so you can get natural ventilation. This is on courtroom 1, where it's sort of the 20th century concrete floor, which has got a glass roof light, which I'll come to later. We've modified. You can see in the sort of the east foyer, there'll be some good before and afters here, the amount of tiles that were missing, as well as the plasterwork damage. It was really in a desperate state, with buckets and bins collecting water all over the place. So job 1 was to get the roof watertight. Once we've got it watertight, then we can start sort of resolving the issues inside. So where the water had tracked down the walls because of the gutters as well as the leaking roofs, it had rotted the floors. There was dry rot. There were large bits of floors that had been taken out. Windows were damaged and missing. Scaffolding propping up bits of the floors in between. So it was all rather desperate, but sort of ripe for development. So. And then obviously accessibility is a key part of what we're doing, as I mentioned before. You can sort of see here the sort of extension here. So it's a contemporary intervention, but with the green tiles harking back to the sort of the colours and the materiality that's internally going on. New lifts, making sure we've got wide open doors and automatic openers where appropriate, making sure the strategy as a whole works for kind of when you're kind of visiting, and also making sure there's safe ways to get out in case of fire. Next, obviously very important to all buildings and important to us is sustainability, and when we retrofit and adapt and refurbish buildings, making sure we make them as sustainable as possible. It wasn't possible to insulate internally in many of the courtrooms. However, it was possible to insulate many of the walls on the upper floors. So we lined the walls with either lime and cork insulated plaster, where we needed them to be breathable. Where there was modern interventions and it wasn't a breathable wall, we used sort of a plasterboard lining and wood-based insulation. So again, keeping things as soon as possible. So that had a massive impact on the heat loss through the walls. Where they were missing windows and not on the prime elevations, they would replace with double glazed sash windows, or secondary glazing where we couldn't replace the windows or inappropriate to because of the key heritage, the key elevation on Bridewell Street. Insulated the roofs, we replaced the lanterns that were damaged with double glazed, but obviously kept the single glazed stained glass window. So it's that balance of keeping the heritage and where we can make interventions in a sort of room by room, floor by floor approach. This courtroom in the middle, this is courtroom 1. So I don't know if you remember that image before, where they're all falling apart. So we did some joinery repairs, plaster ceiling. We've got extra steel work to strengthen the roof, make sure we can hang all our lighting and AV equipment, and people can do weird things off the roof if they want to. This is the original lay light, which we've put plant above it. So actually this is now an air-conditioned space, and all through all the existing grills, that's where it's vented. And so this is a very neat solution. And the contractor said it'll never work, but we proved we could make it fit. It was a bit painful, but it worked, and I think it looks great. You can see again from the inside the new lanterns and all this plaster work in the east foyer, which was missing and damaged. Some of this was done in situ, some of it was done off site and brought in and then patched in, but all this plaster work was horrifically damaged. Loads of tiles were missing, and we've got those templates made for those and new ones to match the existing. Oh yeah, this is a section through that roof here. We've got the lay lights and all the mechanical vent. And then again, a courtroom here. So there's some insulated plaster where it was missing, but if this plaster was sound, we left it in place. Huge repairs to the ceiling above, some works to joinery, and where we've taken away there's already a motif of floor finishes in the courtrooms because they had been messed around many times, but where we took the judges' benches out, got slightly different finish on the floor, so that there's sort of the shadow of where the judge's bench is still very much evident if you wanted to sort of understand how the building had evolved. Here's some closer images of the tiles and making the new match the existing, and I think it's very hard to tell the difference between the two, so very pleased with that. And the repairs to the ceiling above here. So this is a gas light, which is part of the sort of Victorian ventilation. So they had two grills either side of that, which we actually used as part of our reusing the ventilation strategy. So there's a cowl on the roof. So instead of having the gas light to help draw the air around, we actually had a hybrid system. There was a small fan in the cowl above, drawing the air up. And on the lower level, if you can just see that little, it's called a Tobin tube. It looks a bit like a post box, but that's actually a little hole in the wall. So you've got high and low level air. So it's, again, the Victorians really knew how to sort of ventilate buildings quite cleverly. And then very importantly, this whole process from the beginning was sort of a kind of extension of the client team. Very much was the young people working with CYM. So they were part of the briefing, they were part of putting together mood boards about the look and the feel of the space. They went to site visits to different buildings and said what they didn't like, which informed that. We would have design reviews with them, we would do site tours with them. They were very involved in the selection of the decorations and the sort of fittings and the finishes and the feel of the building. So that they were very much a key part of this process, and their input is very evident when you go around, which was really enjoyable for us and I think for them as well. And then I've got a few before and afters. So yeah, so you can sort of see, well, the sheer level of damage, really. It was sort of 1970s furniture that was removed, the joinery that's sort of restored behind. We did quite a light touch on the joinery, partly because of budget, but also because we did various testings and trialing, and we didn't, if we trying to make it go back to a uniform colour, you'd have lost the texture of the grain, which would have been a real shame. Huge difference in the entrance foyer there, before and after, large scale plasterwork repairs, as well as the lantern above and stained glass windows. And this is a new reception desk, which is low enough, obviously, for wheelchair users. So that's your kind of welcome point. So it's a face once you come in. This is courtroom 2. So this is kind of the one that was sort of restored, and we've still got the judges' benches here. There were some of the stained glass windows. They put this god-awful vent through here. That's a service duct, and they knocked out one of these windows to punch it through the wall. So we reinstated stained glass windows to match the existing. And then again, the entrance foyer, missing tiles, damaged. Whoops, sorry, I went too far. Missing tiles, damaged plasterwork, repairs to the floors, and most of this is damaged because of water. And that's again that courtroom there we mentioned before. And then some of this is a meeting room, which is rather lovely space now. Previously had been used as a juror's room. This is kind of the feel of the office spaces above. So some of them have got parquet floor, obviously very much kept the parquet floor. Floor boxes and lots of power and the data on the walls, lots of flexibility, and then mixture of carpets on the floors above. And then the basement, which is sort of, we did a shell and core, really sort of future fitting out. So at some point in the future, I hope that's a sort of leisure and bar space. But we sort of did put all the services in, and there's an awful lot of services in there. So we didn't have service on the ground floor. So it all moves around the basement and pops up, because obviously we didn't want things chasing through terrazzo floors and mosaic floors. But it's all got fire stopped, and the sort of fire strategies enabled, so that's the next phase will be the extension to get the level access of Silver Street, and to hopefully have a rather fabulous drinking venue at the bottom. Back to Mark.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Nuria. Yeah, so it was quite a journey, the refurbishment. We were on site with it from September 2022 to June 2024. So 1 3/4 years, and as Claire's alluded, it wasn't the most straightforward journey. I think it aged me several years in the process. We won't bore you with the gory detail of it, but yeah, it was quite an endeavour, and I was quite pleased at the end when our professional team came to us and said that was the most challenging project we've ever worked on. So that made me feel better about having found it really, really difficult. But anyway, that's all done now. We've done the refurb. We were then so pleased last summer to get to opening. So yeah, we had a 3-day opening festival in June, and as with almost everything on this project, it was all conceived, organised, hosted by young people. We had a team of young producers. We put them through an event management course with mentoring from industry experts, and they curated the whole thing. And very fittingly, before we opened to the public, we started completely as we should have, with an event for young people. It was called Unlock Your Future. It was a networking and careers fair with local creative and cultural sector employers. Next slide, please. So yeah, just a few shots of some of the opening celebrations and events. We even had top right there a deep sea diver, which was my favourite bit of the whole lot. But yeah, we had music, dance performances, yeah, and really sort of got the building off on a good start with the sort of things we wanted to deliver in there. Next slide. So now we're in the phase of making it count. So we are focused on steadily building up the on-site community. I think so. We've got 3 amazing organisations who are already renting space there. We've got the Bristol School of Acting, who are a drama and acting school, Para Orchestra, who are a disability orchestra, part of the Arts Council National Portfolio, and we've got St Paul's Carnival, who for anybody based in Bristol, you'll know is one of the largest community and cultural events in the city. So 3 fantastic organisations who've chosen to make the courts their home, and more in negotiation. So we're steadily building up that community, and I think Claire said earlier, one of the sort of the essences of how we work with organisations on the site is that everybody who comes to the courts have what we call a give back offer. So each of those organisations, they're not just running their business from there, they are making an offer for young people, creating new opportunities, which goes to the heart of what that's all about. If you click on, please, Claire. So alongside that, building the tenant and the community of regular occupiers, we're running a whole load of showcases, events. You've got a flavour from what's on screen there. We've done careers fairs. We've been commissioning young artists to put the finishing touches on the buildings, like producing murals for some of the bare walls. And really, it's this isn't the sort of project and building where you complete the refurb and then you turn on the lights the next day and it's all done. It's very much about community building and creating the networks and the connections. But we're steadily, with each thing we're doing, building this into the vision of what it's meant to be, a creative enterprise hub. And as next steps on that, we are hoping soon to have a cafe offer on site, and we are fundraising and working on feasibility around how we can introduce a co-working offer, which we think would be a really valuable offer for emerging young creative freelancers. And as Claire mentioned, there's also the amazing potential of the basement, which is personally my favourite bit of the building, and there's huge potential there. So we'll be looking for the right partner to come and do something suitably exciting in the cells. Next slide. Also wanted to mention our digital heritage tour. So as part of the project, we've said there was such an amazing history in the building. So as part of the project, we partnered with the University of West of England, and we got a group of our young people alongside history students at UE. They trawled the archives. They came up with some amazing stories of people who'd been through the courts, cases that had been tried there. My personal favourite is the Whipper of Winston, a suffragette who attacked Winston Churchill at Bristol Temple Meads Station as part of the suffragette movement. So that was quite a high-profile case. But anyway, we put some of the amazing stories that came out of that piece of work to a public vote. And from that, we got six stories, which then made it into our digital tour. So if you're ever able to visit, you'll see on the walls in our reception a QR code to download our digital app, and that will take you on an amazing tour of the building, which will talk you through all of these stories. It's really impressive. So yeah, do encourage any of you locally based to come and take a look and engage with that. Next slide. We're drawing to a close, but I guess one of the sort of final things I wanted to say was just what a huge project this was for us. And it was definitely a journey, a voyage of discovery, and it took a huge team to make that happen. And definitely can't name and thank everybody because we'd be here all day. You've got just some of the logos of the key organisations and funders involved on the screen, but it was a massive team effort to make this happen. And I think that's one of my key takeaways is you need to, for any kind of project, but especially one of this scale, you need to recognise what you as a person and as an organisation, where your strengths are, but where your skills gaps are, and assemble the team. And of course, we're especially grateful to our funders, without whom this would not be possible. And the most significant funder there, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and of course lottery players who make that all possible. Completely down to them that we've been able to do this. So thank you. Next slide. Brilliant. Yes. So that's us done. We've put on this final slide, and we can share afterwards some links so you can find out more about the courts, more about Creative Youth Network, and more about Purcell. And you've got our contact details here. We're happy to help anybody if we can. But yeah, really also happy to take questions now.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. It's an absolutely fascinating part of Bristol, having, been there, been past there so many times. I need to come and actually go inside now sometime. I've got a heap of questions, but I just wondered if we could throw it open to the delegates here today. If anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question or post something in the chat box, feel free to. Otherwise, I'm going to ask my questions.
Well, could I ask? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm just interested about car parking. Is that a problem? I don't see much area for car parking around the building.
No, so we don't have public car parking. So yes, we are a very constrained city centre site. We have a couple of spaces for loading, unloading, and contractor visits, but no, we don't have our own car parking on site. Luckily, we are sandwiched between NCP car park and the Gallery shopping centre. So yeah, there are options, but that is one of the, I guess that is one of the constraints of a city centre project, definitely.
Of course. I mean, that's something that we're facing, is the problem of car parking in our little scheme. So I was just interested to hear the planners sometimes push for car parking quite heavily, and but obviously if there's other car parks nearby, then you can do that. You can use paid car parks, and I suppose youth wouldn't maybe need cars as much as adults anyway.
Sorry, Claire, are you speaking? I don't think we can hear you. I mean, just to say on that, Jeffrey, yes. So I'm not across the detail of the planning requirements. I don't think, with the nature of the buildings, we were pushed to do that, because I don't think you could create a car park unless you demolish the listed buildings. So it just wouldn't be possible. But definitely and before the courts open with the station as well, we very much worked on I suppose one of the key advantages is we are right by the bus station. We're we're also walkable from the main train station, so it's got good access, but not great for parking, unfortunately.
That's okay. Thank you.
Yes, we can.
Oh, fab. And that was kind of the point I was going to make. Yes, we're sort of 2 minutes from Broadmead, right in the middle of Bristol. So there's fabulous bus routes. The planners, basically, the main thing was making sure we had covered secure cycle storage. They wanted lots to help encourage people. They wanted to encourage people to cycle and bus in. Really, they almost discourage the use of cars. And Mark's always talked about the deliveries and drop-offs.
Very good. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I just wanted to ask, before I move on to the other questions, something that our members are often find the most difficult thing to do is engaging with the local authority, when it's starting on a project like this, maybe not as huge as this project, but some of them are. And I just wondered, did you have to engage with the local authority? And if so, have you got any tips for working with them?
So, I mean, when you've got a building as significant as this and in such a desperate state of this, and realizing that this is kind of this building's last chance of survival and not being knocked down. So they were actually, for the most part, very supportive and helpful, and they had quite strong ideas on certain things, which is fine. it was sort of a few years ago now, so I think we'd probably be forced to go through a pre-app process because of the way in which they kind of can't do anything until they've got a piece of paper, and even if there's no fee but something. But the council and the conservation officers engaged early on with us, so we gave them several tours, talked about what we wanted to do, what we're trying to do, and for the most part they were actually very supportive. We did get a bit held up in planning. They were sort of worth faffing about, so we did have to get a bit pushy in the end, sort of saying, look, if you don't give this approval, we're going to lose the funding. And then they did put it through with the 50,000 conditions. But generally, I think the council and the conservation officers, they understood that that they were extension of the team really, and we had to all be sort of playing off the same hymn sheet, and they'd come along and help approve the conditions with us, and we do agree sort of sensible solutions on site where things had to change slightly. So I mean, it's a major part of our job, I think, is having those early discussions and building up that trust and rapport, and working together really. I mean, we use the word collaboration an awful lot, but the key to success of these projects actually is collaboration and getting everyone on board early and making sure that they understand what we're trying to do early enough and a part of that process. Because if you kind of present something complete without any discussions, then normally conservation officers and planning officers won't react very well to that. We also had a very good planning officer as well, who was good at sort of trying to chase things down when it needed to be by other people, which she had to work with as well. It's not just a planning officer who can sign it off. So yeah, I think Bristol planning is, like all of them, is really squeezed, but they tried to help where they could, I think.
That's really good.
The other thing I'd say on that is obviously the council is lots of different departments and teams, and actually I suppose particularly in our context, given the organisation we are, I suppose we had contact with a lot of different officers at the council. We had as a youth charity, we had relationships with their youth service commissioners and social care and all sorts. So I suppose we had really broad support from other departments in the council, which I think then helped probably when we needed to put pressure on, actually, let's get the planning through. Obviously there was a formal process to follow, but there was also, we worked quite hard at making sure we had the political and the senior officer goodwill to make the project happen. And it probably also helped us, the fact that a commercial developer had tried and failed to develop the scheme. So it was very much, well, this is a last chance saloon, because if nobody can develop it commercially, we've secured a heritage lottery grant. If you're not going to back this, then literally we've run out of options.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Oh, Sue's got her hand up.
I'm Weymouth Area Development Trust. I'm just about at the beginning of, have been through all that with the local authority. Can you tell me who coordinated the messaging between what the local authority required, what the developer required, what we as the organisation who want it to be a certain way, who made sure all of that was being communicated? Because for that amount of time, that seems, I mean, ours looks like about 6 months. So I'd love to know who actually did that coordinating.
It was sort of in the middle. It would normally be us, myself and Nuria, and then we'd have site meetings with necessary people or Teams calls, and various emails, obviously copying the wider team. We don't normally work with planning consultants, if that's what you mean, because they tend to just sort of be another middle person. I suppose we sort of found this is the best way in these cultural heritage projects. If you're doing a kind of a mass development of 200 houses, it's maybe a bit different. But if cultural heritage projects, which is kind of what we specialise in, we normally do it directly ourselves, and it's a really important relationship. So it needs to be managed and developed, and actually it's normally a very positive one. And actually the planning officers and conservation officers have a huge wealth of local knowledge and understanding, and who to talk to for a whole range of things, sometimes even helping with sort of, if you talk to that person about funding and all sorts of things. So there's a huge wealth of knowledge and expertise there to tap into, as well as obviously trying to get the piece of paper that we need to move on. So yeah, kind of then we put ourselves in the middle of it. And then, as Mark said, sometimes if something needs to be a bit higher up the food chain, then we'd ask Mark to write a letter. But most of it day to day.
And did you deal directly with the builders who were actually doing the hammering and the nailing and the?
Oh no, sorry. So there was a project manager as well. So Atkins Reals was the project managers and the contractor. So there was the main contractor, who's Brain Slaughter. So they it was a traditional procurement contract. And Brain Slaughter then would have all their sort of run that on site with all their subcontractors as necessary, with us visiting once every 2 or 4 weeks, depending on the time of the project and likely. But yeah, no, we definitely didn't manage that. We just, in terms of the planners and the conservation officers, that's what I was referring to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, no problem.
That's great, thank you. I wondered, given the issues that Mark mentioned at the start with COVID and Russia invading Ukraine, how did you sort of stand back? I mean, it's probably more a question for Mark, and remix that funding cocktail, because you could see from your slides, you've got a whole range of funders there and partners. What did you do? After crying for a while, I would imagine.
That definitely featured, yes. I mean, I could talk for hours on that. I'll try and give a simple version. There was lots we did. I suppose it kind of key things to that. I suppose one, keep the purpose in mind and be really clear on what are the essentials and the non-negotiables and what's nice to have, or actually what, even if it might be essential, what actually could be done as phase 2 later. Because as Clare and Nuria has said, there was a very real, we have to do this now, otherwise we lose the funding and the building deteriorates beyond economic repair. So I think that informed, for example, when I joined Creative Youth Network and the project, we had lovely plans for the basement and we were going to fund all that ourselves. That fell away before we started on site, because that could absolutely be done as a phase 2. I think the other main thing I'd say is communication. So I think it's about being open with your funders, talking it through, well, with actually not just with funders very important, but actually with everybody, with all stakeholders. And for us, young people were absolutely critical to that. So, okay, something unforeseen has come along. Don't know if we're going to be able to do what we've said before. Let's talk it through. And actually, you get a real pressure at certain times, and definitely there were times on site where you've got the pressure of the decision making. We need to tell the contractor to do this or stop doing that tomorrow, otherwise we're going to incur X £1,000, where you feel the real pressure. And sometimes you do just have to jump. But actually, if you can recognize which of the decisions you have to make there and then in the moment, and if you can recognize which ones actually can be consulted on and talked through, actually that time of reflection and talking things through does lead to better decision making. So I think I don't think we got it perfect in every case, but I think that's the ideal, is just try and take that decision making calmly and as consultatively as you can in the circumstances. But also credit to a whole load of supporters, funders, organisations who, in particular the Heritage Fund, actually they might have run a mile from the project when all that happened, but actually it does take cooperation, collaboration, buy-in to keep things on track when they go wrong.
Yeah, so keep that purpose in mind, everybody who's here, and have time to reflect. That sounds like really great advice. I just wanted to ask one more question before the time's gone so quickly. What I'll do is I'll take all the questions that we haven't got to, and I'll email them over to you if that's okay, and I can send out the answers at a later date with the recording. Hannah has a question about co-creation and how much decision-making power did the young people have, and if so, how did that process work?
Yeah, so I like to think they had an awful lot, and they were genuinely not necessarily in charge of every single decision, but integral to all the decision making. Certainly, it was young people were part of the original vision for what should this building become, you know, because it could have been anything. It didn't need to be a creative enterprise hub. Young people might have come up with something different, but that is what they came up with. And obviously, what you've got to be careful about with involving, I suppose, any client or customer group, for us it's young people. You want to keep them at the heart of it, but also that doesn't mean go and ask a group of young people and then what they tell you is necessarily the right answer, because each group has their own perspective, it's its own moment in time. So I think for us, and you can sort of read about our approach to youth participation on our website, and we've got a whole strategy and action plan around it, but it's about multiple opportunities, multiple data points. And I suppose there are times and cases where actually the decision is best taken by our staff team and youth workers from years of experience working with this cohort, that we have an understanding and a perspective that an individual young person or a group of 8 or 10 of young people won't have. But on the other hand, there is no, you can't get into thinking we know better than young people. So actually you've just got to keep asking and keep engaging with young people. So that was, we put good budget from this project into the staff posts, the resource we would need to keep running engagement sessions, host our youth advisory board, get them involved in decision making. They had a whole load of very meaningful, very big decisions, ranging from the strategy of what the building should be down to colour of the carpet. There were also cases where, they wanted to do something, we didn't have the money. Well, that didn't magic up the money, did it? But we'd then have a conversation about, so what is possible, or what could we do? So I'm probably rambling, and that's maybe not a straight answer, but I think it comes down to, it is nuanced, but there has to be a whole range of things to have genuine youth involvement. And I think that applies probably to all kind of customer and stakeholder engagement in different contexts as well.
That's really good advice. I know we've got quite a few members that are all about co-creation, so yeah, that'll be music to their ears. Okay, the time's gone so quickly. I will note down all the questions and pass them on to the three of you. So I just wanted to say a massive thank you again to Mark, Claire and Nuria. Purcell Creative Youth Network, go and look them up after you've switched off Zoom. Yeah, thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant, and we have recorded it. We will be sharing the link, and hopefully we'll see you at our next session in a couple of weeks' time. So thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Really enjoyed that. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.